It's time for AggroChat, the official podcast of the Tales of the Aggronaut blog and stalwart gaming community, where we talk about stuff and things, and the stuff about the things, and sometimes gaming. I'm Belgast, and let's start the show.
Hey folks, it's that time again. Time for another episode of AggroChat. This is episode 357. Tonight I'm joined by Ammo.
Hello.
Ashgar.
Is that an important number?
Well, I mean, yeah, sort of. I mean, depending on what region you live in. Grace.
Hi.
Kodra.
Hello.
Bam.
Hello.
And Thalen.
Teeth.
Teeth.
The bluey thing.
No.
One of the things on our list.
Okay. Oh, okay. I get it now.
Remember the meat circus? Remember how creepy the meat circus was?
It's been a really long time. So one of the things that I wanted to talk about this week, mostly because I'm annoyed by it. Okay, we've talked about everything that's going on with Blizzard right now. And if you were to table all of the institutional problems that they have had, you are still left with World of Warcraft has not been in a great state for a while. It is the second expansion in a row that hasn't been terribly well received. And not long ago, a patch dropped that also wasn't very well received. Shadowlands was a weird experience, and there were a lot of things that were needlessly painful about the expansion. And I know we've talked about this before, the Covenant system, and the fact that players wanted to be able to change it so that they could swap the abilities based on what, happened to be the spec of the week. And that this is a thing that Blizzard has said was impossible to change.
Mm.
So this week, patch notes for 9.1.5 were kind of previewed. And basically all of these systems that Blizzard said were impossible to change are all of a sudden changing on a dime because they're in trouble.
Yeah.
The players leaving, plus the institutional situation they find themselves in, has meant they're scrambling to do player service things and cramming them all into this one patch. And it feels real bad and is ending up pissing off a lot of people because if they could do this all this time, why didn't they do it earlier?
Mm-hmm. Well, because you think you want those things, but you don't really want them.
There's this weird adversarial relationship that studio has with its players, more so than any other studio.
I was going to say, I don't know that that's just that studio that has a weird adversarial relationship.
Yeah, you see some of that
more
in a lot of them
with Blizzard.
It's so strong with Blizzard.
Yeah.
It's one of those things. It's one of those things where, as a game dev, it is your job to know what players don't realize they want. Often in the face of players telling you, no, that's not what I want.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a really fine balance to be able to do that, and especially be able to do that and be right about it ever, and not have that go straight to your head.
Yeah, because I think the big thing with Blizzard is not only that they have been doing that, but that they were so upfront and vocal about, no, you don't know, we know better than you, and yeah. It's like that they were jerks about it.
That's the thing. You can work very hard and prove to your players that yes, you are an excellent game dev and you can make enjoyable things that the players didn't expect. That's great. But flat out confronting your players by saying, no, you don't want what you say you want, it's not the way to get there.
So, I feel like it's important that we talk about Covenant system a little bit more, because this is a system design that highlights this point. So basically, when Shadowlands went into Friends and Family Alpha, one of the first drum beats that you heard from the community was that the Covenant system needed to change. In theory, you are supposed to make a permanent choice for your character that is whose faction you're going to bind to in the Shadowland. And that dictates what cosmetics and what abilities you get. And the abilities can be not insignificant based on what your class is. And in a lot of cases, there was one right answer per class. So if someone did the thing Blizzard said and just follow your heart and do it for, cosmetic reasons, and then you start raiding and realize, oh crap, I am 30% less damage because I don't have this one ability. People quickly realized, oh, hey, this is going to be a bad idea. We need a way to change. And for all of the beta and alpha cycle for the expansion, people said, we need a way to change. And finally, at the 11th hour, Blizzard's like, fine, we'll give you a way to change your covenant, but we're going to make it really onerous to where you have to basically reset all the renowned progress that you've made and grind back up a new faction. And this is a situation where you can only make a certain amount of progress every week. But there was a way to switch factions, and they were like, oh, yeah, this is fine. This is fine. The players, this is fine. They're not going to want to change it regularly. So they have been saying, well, there's no way for us to do this. This is impossible. This is too important a system to ever make it to where you can freely change covenants. And now in this, oops, we fucked up and we're losing players patch, you can just freely change covenants. You can completely skip the covenant system altogether and just start with a brand new covenant that's fully leveled up.
Was there any other than a player player abilities? Was there any other point to the covenant system? Was it tied to any PvP events or factional
cosmetics?
There were cosmetics, and there were also things that happened in each covenant's zones that couldn't be accessed by any other covenant. So Necrolords, for example, had this build an abomination system where you basically built around a follower that would fight with you, that you could give it different abilities. Trying to think of what some of the other systems were. There were world bosses that you only could summon if you were of a specific covenant. There was a chunk of content that you didn't have access to if you weren't of that covenant. Also mounts and cosmetics. But now it's basically to where, you can rapidly switch through all the covenants and be able to wear any of the stuff for your characters once this thing goes through. Another system that they put in was the Conduit System, and it was basically a second talent point tree. And again, they didn't want people to swap their talents around or their conduits around. So they
let people swap talents all the time now.
Mm-hmm.
So what they did is they made it so you regenerated, there was an energy system. So if you swapped your talents, it would take a full day to regenerate another talent swap. So I forget how many you could have saved up, but the theory was, on raid night, you could swap all your conduits and then swap them back. And then in 6 days later, you could swap them again. And that frustrated the hell out of people. And now that system is apparently just completely going away. There is no energy system now. It's just swap them whatever you want. There's a whole bunch of character customizations that are suddenly going into the game. People have been wanting the ability to make void elves look like high elves forever. And that's now in the game. A bunch of Lightforged Draenei things so that you can look like the NPC Lightforged Draenei. Basically, all of the allied races now suddenly have a bunch of things that players requested for customizations. All of the allied races that used to have onerous grinds in order to unlock them, just unlock. You can just walk up to the person and start the quest chain to get the race. No having to grind out mechanomes or anything like that. You could just do that now.
Oh, hey, that's actually really nice.
They're adding in Legion time walking so that people can remember the good old days.
Yeah, I saw that apparently the seagulls are back in town.
They are. people have been begging for the ability to solo queue an island expedition since there's no reason why you can't solo it now, but it was still a match-made activity and you had to find a group for it. So now you can solo queue island expedition so people can farm whatever the hell they're missing from that system. Like there's all these quality of life improvements that my thing is like, okay, if you could turn this patch around this fast, why did you hold these things from the players? Like if you knew all of these systems were just needlessly arcane, why didn't you do this before?
So they could save it for when they needed to bring players back.
Yeah, I guess.
I feel like that's attributing a level of planning that probably isn't deserved.
That's probably true.
I was going to say, my guess is they just didn't think it would, like, it might harm player retention, but or it would lead to people running out of content, something like that. If I had to guess, it would be, hey, you 15 people, figure it out. Whatever you are working on, push it out. Make these changes now because we need to stem the bleeding now.
Yeah.
This thing that you're working on that was going to launch in 6 months can wait.
It almost feels like they've gone through the forums and looked for whatever hot button issues they could find that they could turn around quickly. Like, here's this mega patch of all these quality of life improvements. Please love us again.
I mean, that's not even touching the fundamental issue, which is after everything that's come out, and especially some of the more recent stuff that's come out, who on earth is playing any Blizzard games? I mean, I love Blizzard games. They're such a huge part of my life, and there's so many things that I was looking forward to, or things that I played religiously because they brought me comfort. But man, I just can't, and I can't even think of what they could do to win me back at this point.
Yeah, I mean, for me, this is all, I don't know, like, okay, so I get that these are all things that players wanted, but like it also comes across as super tone deaf at this point.
I mean,
But either we didn't agree.
They have to keep working on content. I mean, I understand. And there's a completely different swath of people who are responsible for that compared to being responsible for the stuff that I'm actually mad about.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like, I hate in some ways that my choice to step away harms some people whose fault it definitely was not. But yeah, I don't know. They need to start course correcting in any sort of visible way.
And well, stop digging would be number one. Like,
yeah,
because the most recent news was they actually shredded a bunch of HR documents.
Yeah, that was definitely the last straw for me.
Yeah.
So I'm not a legal expert, but if you destroy evidence, isn't that automatically assumed that it was the worst possible?
Yes,
Yeah.
generally speaking.
And this implies that they decided that whatever the fine's going to be for having done that, it's not as bad as what they would have ended up paying otherwise.
No, but I mean, I thought that if you destroyed things, it was assumed that whatever it said is assumed to have been the worst possible thing it could have said.
It might have opened the company up to, like, it might have expanded the scope. I'm not a legal expert either. This might be about preventing scope expansion of the thing.
Yeah.
I
It's too
know
late for that too, but hey.
Yeah.
I know that one of the big things is that they recently expanded the scope to cover all workers, not just full-time employees.
I mean, I think part of it is, when people start panicking, they start making poor choices.
Yeah, that's true.
So another thing that's come out this week, which is really interesting, is a bunch of stuff about Call of Duty Vanguard came out over Gamescom. And it has lots of studios on it, but it nowhere says anything about Activision or Blizzard on all of the advertising.
Yeah, that does make you think. I mean, I've seen people wonder if they might ultimately end up rebranding themselves simply as King Entertainment.
That would be weird.
I know that.
Very weird.
Yeah.
And that's the big part of their whole multi-company thing that hasn't been dragged into all of this. So,
Also, I have not been playing. I am not very familiar, but I did get briefly spoiled on recent storyline, and I gotta say, having your character who commits monstrous atrocities ask for and receive forgiveness from most of the people seems a little bit wish fulfillment to me.
Yeah, it's a mess. It's just, I do wonder if this is gonna achieve the result they're hoping for. Like, is this patch full of, or player maintenance things going to make people forget? Because gamers have a notoriously short attention span when it comes to things that they don't want to care about.
I mean, that's true. I don't know.
I guess it's very interesting. I guess because I'm still like kind of burned about the last controversy that caused me to leave Blizzard Games.
Mm-hmm. I mean, that's the thing, is it's not like there was just one thing that happened. There's just been, like, this was on top of so many previous reasons to leave of, varying levels. I do have to say, like, calling back to it, because like it's definitely one of those things where my feelings on it have changed, and I'm not necessarily the firebrand that I was when I boycotted over the Hong Kong Taiwan comments and the subsequent like disaster piece fallout from that. Like, that's definitely a more complicated, and I was definitely a lot more jingoistic at that point in time. But like, it's still like, oh yeah, there's a whole bunch of things going on here. And that's the last one that I remember boycotting them for. And so I guess it makes it easier for me to, like, I had stopped playing any of their games then, and I guess I'm just not going to continue to not play their games.
And I guess, here's the thing for me is, like, even if you were able to take all of that off the table somehow, the stewardship of World of Warcraft has been in a very poor space for 5-6 years.
Mm-hmm.
At least. Like, I mean, Legion was an uptick. I enjoyed it greatly. But like, Legion was also a high point after a down point. So like, the game is not in great shape. And just because here's this patch of things that people wanted doesn't prove to me that there's any pattern there.
I mean,
like, it doesn't steer the ship in the right direction necessarily. It's just, oh, hey, this is a fan service patch.
So, and so to use FF14 as an example, I really, really didn't like one of the story arcs post Stormblood. I thought it was gross. I thought it was sexist, but it was one misstep along a lot of steps. And like, yeah, I stopped playing it for a bit because I didn't like it and it bugged me and I didn't like what it represented. But at the same time, they have both in their narrative and elsewhere kind of copped to it and been like, yep, we'll try to be better. And they've acted on that. And through the last few years, and I've been out of Blizzard games at this point for quite a while. I think that the last game that I played that was on the Blizzard launcher was Destiny 2. There's like, not only is there little more than lip service, what feels like little more than lip service to will be better, but then it just doesn't bear out in actions. It's like, what is the next misstep in 6 months? And how many missteps do you make before it's just a bad path?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, one mistake is a mistake. Once you start having multiple, that's a pattern. And then you have a problem.
I mean, and like, there's not. Once upon a time, game launches were infrequent enough that you just knew you could be. You just knew that if you made good enough games, they would sell like hotcakes, and you didn't really have to worry about anything else. But like, there are so many games to play.
Yeah.
It is really hard. It is really hard to have a game so important to the gaming zeitgeist that people can just like nobody can afford not to play it. Like, that was true in the 90s.
Mm-hmm.
But, and you know, there's a lot of companies, Blizzard is one of them, that cut their teeth in the 90s and early 2000s when that was possible, but it just isn't anymore.
Yeah.
Well, and probably more so than that, like, we're just coming off of Gamescom. It wasn't that long ago that we had E3. And like, those are shows that I sit there and watch, and there's hundreds of good looking games that are probably never going to get the time of day from the press. That, right. You know, like there's so many hidden gems out there that are just like cranking out month after month.
Yeah, like I haven't even there are massive there are massive, like, incredible games that I feel good about. Like, I feel not just neutral but actively good about supporting that I haven't had time to play. I'm still only like 30 minutes into Ratcheting Clank.
Yeah, there's so many games. More games than I know what to do with.
Yeah.
And the problem is like, it's a backlog that grows exponentially every year, because there's so many games that I didn't get to play last year, and so many games the year before that I didn't get to play.
Yep.
So, like, you know, shooting yourself in the foot on something that's not even necessarily related to your games, on top of having a bunch of issues with your actual games.
Well, so like, I think the most damaging thing that has happened in this recent situation is Blizzard gamers have had this mindset of pining for the good old days. And this is basically showing that there's no such thing as good old days. Like, it was even worse before.
Yeah.
Like, they may have been creating the games you wanted to play, but that situation was absolutely toxic for anyone that was there.
I mean, I could have looked at the one guy's name and told you that, like, from the very beginning.
Yeah.
Well, like, okay, so, I have experience with Alex Afrasiabi. I played on the same server he did in EverQuest. He was a jackass.
Uh-huh.
He taught his guild to basically take whatever the hell they wanted, and it didn't matter who got in the way. Like, there's a situation where a guild I was part of was trying to raid hate, and something spawned that they wanted, and they flooded the zone with people and just took it and laughed. And that was the mindset that he instilled in his folks, was to take whatever you want because you own the server.
I think Kodra was more referring to Jeff Kaplan's alias Tiggle.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
That's exactly what I was
But Jeff Kaplan was a guild leader. Now, he was on a different server. He was on Prexis.
Yeah.
But like, he was a similar guild leader.
Yeah, it was the same sort of mindset.
He was the big guild on Prexis. You know, Führer, like, they called him Führer in WoW, but his name was Führer only because it wouldn't let him put the other spelling of Führer in the game.
Mm-hmm.
He was on Vashon, and like, I would imagine, like, I didn't play on Prexis. I know people who did, but I would assume the mindset was the same on either one. They were the mega guild that owned the server.
Yeah.
I mean, in a lot of ways, Blizzard as a studio has reflected that we are the best. We will do whatever we want mindset.
Mm-hmm.
Oh yeah, and like, if you think about the way they treat their competition, it's always like, we need to destroy it, and we need to destroy it immediately. Like, so much of the stuff I see is about how hey, can you imagine where MMOs could be if not for World of Warcraft poisoning the well?
Yeah, I mean it's been sucking all the oxygen out of the room for decades, and finally is apparently losing its breath, to take the metaphor. I don't know.
Well, but I mean, it's also kind of killed. Like MMOs are a shadow of what they. Well, maybe I'm wrong. I don't know. MMOs do not seem like they are what they used to be. And maybe they are more popular now, and maybe the numbers are better, but they are definitely a different beast. And that's sort of what I always get frustrated with.
I think a lot of the weird, cool stuff ended up dying out because it could not compete monetarily with World of Warcraft. So, but, I mean, it's
I don't know if there was a way.
What would things be like?
Yeah.
It's
who knows? It's not just MMOs though, because like a lot of the weird, cool things that were happening in games in general died out in the post WoW era of mega hits, or the post Call of Duty era.
Yeah, and then eventually, like indie game studios started, cropping up and getting, and actually being able to like get some support, and that's mostly where you see that now. Those those strange little games that are like nothing else out there, that take risks, and then one of them explodes, and then Microsoft or Activision or whatever buys it or clones it and makes $1 billion
and keeps it on life support, which because they don't understand what made it popular in the first place.
Yeah.
I do have to say though, like honestly, Microsoft has done an extremely good job with Minecraft.
I mean,
they have done a good job keeping that game, evolving, and they've also kept the two paths where, the Wild West or the Java path can do whatever the hell they want to, and the Windows path is more structured and cash shoppy, but they both function.
I did also want to bring up as like a I don't know, just kind of in comparison, it's so the Rising is taking place in Final Fantasy right now, in Final Fantasy 14. It just started, which is the annual holiday that is the anniversary of the launch of A Realm Reborn, and like is very much memorializing the end of the old failed game and its rebirth, and every year they do it, and it's it's different every year because in Final Fantasy 14 it's actually new stuff each year for the holidays. But every year it always culminates with a direct message from Yoshi P to you, the player, thanking you for your support and for staying with him, and talking about like a little bit of what he has, his plans for the coming year, and just like wanting to continue like keeping the game going. And like it I played through that the other day, and like it actually had me choking up a little bit, because like I believe him, like again based on just everything we've seen of him, of the game and the way they act. Like
it's like there's a humility, because I know they're living off of borrowed time, but boy, have they made that borrowed time work for them.
Yeah. And I mean, and it's it feels it just feels very, very respectful and thanking us, the players.
They feel very genuine.
Yeah.
Well, and like this game has managed to feel like it's still a passion project by everyone working on it.
Mm-hmm.
And that's not to say that there are not people at every single game out there for which it is a passion project for them. But there are some games that don't do a good enough job of letting that show. That like, oh, hey, this is the game that I am making that I also want to play. And I got my second credit roll on Shadowbringers this morning. And my God, it's going to be an interesting expansion.
Oh, yes.
Like that, it's. I really appreciate the predictable cadence of patch content for Final Fantasy 14, in that you have, point 1 and point 2, and they're kind of a slow burn, and they're building up to point 3, which is the eventual resolution of whatever the hanging threads were from the previous expansion main story quest.
Mm-hmm.
And then you've got point 4, where you learn of a new threat, and then point 5 and point 55, it basically ignites the fire that like lights the fuse for the next expansion.
Yeah, like which results in us having this long story that does feel like one long story.
You know, I didn't really think about this. Guild Wars 2 Season 3 is also structured kind of like that.
Mm-hmm.
It's a good structure. Like, it makes a lot of sense. Like, do the thing, give a nice resolution, get players excited about the next thing.
Well, and it's also shows that you care about it shows that you still care about the story that was just experienced and you're not hurrying on to the next thing, but also that you're going to set up the next thing. It's like shepherding.
Yeah.
Well, and to be fair, that's the key problem I have with World of Warcraft. That, you know, we go through an expansion cycle and the expansion largely forgets about everything that came before it. And then when it is put in the ground, the next expansion will forget about everything that happened in the previous one.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I always feel like
they're independent stories that aren't connected to anything.
I also feel like the expansion itself rarely tells a story, and it's all of the like patch content that tells the story of that expansion through the raids. And so like you get to the climax right before the next expansion drops.
Yeah.
But then that actual expansion isn't the story.
Yeah.
Right.
Whereas in Final Fantasy, you've got a solid climax at the end of the base expansion, and then additional climaxes of, you know, through the patches.
It is the challenge that World of Warcraft only seems to be able to tell expansion or stories through their raids, or at least that's how it felt. I don't know if that's still true.
All of the important story beats seem like they're fleshed out through a raid. Like, you know, the only thing that ever gets into an actual story is the couple things leading up to the big reveal. But the big reveal, you're going to have to go watch on Wowhead if you're not actively raiding, because, you know, you're not going to get to see the story. I guess technically they show the cutscenes through LFR, but still, you have to go do the raid to go see what the hell happened in the story, or it's been offloaded to a book. And there's so much stuff that happens in books anymore, but never happens in game.
That's true. There has been a lot of that over the course of the game.
I thought they were getting better about not doing that. But yes, I know there has been a lot of that.
All of the story leading up to Shadowlands that would make the expansion make more sense happened, I think, in the Sylvanas book. So it seems very much like they're still doing that thing. Whereas like a Guild Wars 2 or a Final Fantasy 14, all of the key story beats are happening in the game itself.
Yeah. Guild Wars 2 had the one book that took place before the story, but yeah.
They had 2 books during that time.
Oh, there were 2? Okay.
One was actually not actually all that bad, but then there was the one for Destiny's Edge, which was terrible.
But yeah, I would definitely put please tell me the game's story via the game high on my list of, you know, just general requests to game studios that you wouldn't think would need to be said.
Man, speaking of telling the story in the game you're currently playing, is a decent follow-up to the next topic.
Yeah.
So
Teeth.
So Psychonauts 2 came out.
It did. I've been waiting for this game for right at a decade.
You know what? I've been waiting for it a long time too. And I have played through the introduction, which was very fun. But it did have so there's something weird about Psychonauts. Like truly, like it seems like it's not weird, but this story is a continuation of the stories that came before it. Like literally, from Psychonauts 1 through the Rhombus of Ruin to this, I think we've been like maybe 48 hours of like in-game time passage, if that.
At one point, one of it's Coach Oleander specifically references the original game, and like as if it was something that's like way in the past, because and Raz's response is, "It's been 3 days."
Okay. Yeah.
So yeah.
But so I am having a lot of fun. There's some things that I think they are doing that is incredibly smart. One of them is, instead of having half the game be tutorials where they teach you all of your powers, they give you all of those powers in the very first mission, and they have small little things that definitely, because the game feels better once you have your full power set.
Yeah, this is something I very much wanted to call out as excellent. Is they didn't do the thing where the main character like loses all their powers from the previous game or whatever. Like, none of that. By the end of the initial mission, you have those powers back. Like, you have used them all through the mission, and it's all a matter of when you get to a point within that level where the power is appropriate, either you think of it or the other character who is there with you at that point says, "Hey, we should do this." And you're like, "Oh yeah, I can do that."
Lily tells you should set things on fire because that's Lily's answer to everything.
I mean, yes.
But there is a moment in that exact same section where Dr. Lobato is talking to you, who is teeth. He is the crazed dentist who you are trying to interact with, and you are in his mind, and he makes a comment that, "Hey, didn't we share such a special moment in the Rhombus of Ruin?" And I'm like,
yeah,
I don't know what you're talking about. I didn't play Rhombus of Ruin. No one did.
I can't play Rhombus of Ruin.
Yes.
I want to play it. Let me play this game, but it's VR only, and I can't really justify getting an Oculus Rift or PlayStation VR just for Rhombus of Ruin.
Yeah, I'm going to. I am probably going to borrow a PSVR to play Rhombus of Ruin, but that's if you're gonna tell a story, if you're gonna make a part 2, fine. You can do some things. They do a cute thing where they kind of give you the plot overview of Psychonauts 1 and the Rhombus of Ruin in this Raz is writing a letter to his favorite magazine talking about his exploits so far.
True tales of
the true psychic tales.
True psychic tales, yes.
And fine, that's great. Please do not call back to specific character beats from those stories. Otherwise, you have this moment where I'm like, I don't know what you're talking about, game. And now I'm frustrated because I do want to play this, but I haven't. And maybe you shouldn't expect that I have played this when you are making this game.
I'd like to point out that at the start of Kingdom Hearts 2, Sora has lost all of his memories.
Yep.
So they didn't have to worry about that for the most part.
I mean, that's why having the main character undergo some just drastic event that seriously depowers them / gives them amnesia is such a common thing for sequel games.
Yeah. Alternatively, you can do the TWUI solution, which is release your game as something that you can watch.
Mm-hmm. I mean, I think somebody has done a playthrough of Rhombus of Ruin and put it up on YouTube, so I might just watch that.
Do VR playthroughs look good?
I don't know. I don't.
It's how do you do a playthrough of VR and record it? I would think you would have to experience it in VR.
I tried. I set my streaming setup to be able to stream Half-Life Alyx because I wanted to be able to show it off, and I was not compelled by the results.
Yeah, wouldn't it show I've seen a couple where it shows you the 2 boxes that are what each eye would see.
But you can do better than that.
Okay.
But it's still not great.
Yeah.
Okay.
There is an art to doing a good playthrough, especially of a 3D game, because if you just whip your camera around all the time, it's like off-putting / makes you ill.
Yeah, that would be really disconcerting.
And VR is even more that, because you whip your view around all the time because you're just used to doing that with your head and it doesn't bother you.
Well, and I feel like the answer for some games doesn't work for all games. Like, so Beat Saber. The people that do the Beat Saber runs where they blend themselves into the Beat Saber run, that makes for compelling content. Like, because you get to watch the human doing the things.
Yeah, you're not watching
up with the thing.
You're not watching from their point of view. You're watching from a third person. Yeah.
But like, I don't think most games would lend themselves to that.
Yeah. But yeah, I ended up. I went and just looked up the plot of Rhombus of Ruin because I knew it was very short. So
yeah,
to see what I missed, and it basically boils down to, you know, the original Psychonauts ended with, oh no, Lily's dad has been kidnapped. Let's all go rescue him. And Rhombus of Ruin is find him. Turns out Dr. Lobato kidnapped him. Dr. Lobato's working for someone else, and seems to have a change of heart, and then fly off to Psychonauts HQ.
Okay.
There's this dude, and he had some rhombuses.
Yeah,
he dropped them, and they turned into squares, and then they were ruined.
But yeah, basically the important part is Lobato's working for someone else, and it seems like he doesn't really want to be. He's not doing this entirely voluntarily.
Which you also... Okay, so in fairness, you do get that from the opening sequence.
You do.
Like, you get that Lobato is working for somebody else, and he now has regrets and doubts.
Yeah, and Sasha's, you know, going to set up something to try and take advantage of that to learn more. And that reminds me, the other thing that I'm very happy about that that games do sometimes that this one didn't. You don't have to reprove yourself to Sasha or Mia or anybody from the original game.
Yeah.
They know you. They know how competent you are. They trust you. Now, there are new characters who have not met you before, and you do have to kind of prove yourself to them. It also makes me happy. This is not the entire game that you're having to do this. Like, by the end of the second major level, like you have shown them what you are capable of.
Maybe the fact that you got made a Psychonaut by the notoriously like off his rocker Ford Cruller does not mean you should actually be a Psychonaut.
Yes, you are. You know, he can give you all the badges he wants. He wants. That doesn't make you a Psychonaut. You can be an intern. Speaking of which, make sure. I don't know if you've used clairvoyance on the other interns yet, but you should you should check out how they view you, and make sure you check out how they view you again after your next mission.
Okay, I am currently at the moment where I was told I got to be an intern.
Yeah.
And then I was like, I should try and play Rhombus of Ruin. So I'm going to try and play Rhombus of Ruin.
Okay. I
might try and play Psychonauts 1 again just to refresh myself.
I mean, it's infinitely replayable. It's such a good game.
It's a... So
it has its issues.
I heard a critique of it, which this week, which I agree with, which is like, if you are playing this game at the beginning, it is a pretty mediocre action like platforming game. Because at the beginning, you don't have it does the thing games especially used to do, where you didn't get your full suite of cool moves until like halfway through the game.
Yeah, you gain your powers over the course of the game. Yeah.
At which point, and this is especially bad when what you are lacking are movement powers, because it means movement might not feel good yet.
Yeah, it's true. It's once you have levitation, that's
once you have levitation, once you can roll. Because honestly, rolling in that game is just a blast.
Yeah, and it remains so in Psychonauts too.
It does.
Like, the short version is, if you played Psychonauts and enjoyed it, you will enjoy Psychonauts 2. It is more of that. There are some new powers, there are new characters, but like the overall feel of the game, the sense of humor, like all of that is intact and lovely.
Also, you're getting to solve, like, heavily hinted that you're solving one of the big mysteries that's not really explained at all in the first game.
You're solving a couple of mysteries from the first game. Yes. Oh yeah, this really delves deep into that backstory that the first game just kind of was like, here is the explanation for why the world is like this and these certain aspects. Yeah,
well, very, very specifically, why you are like what you are.
Yes. Oh yes. Very much so. So I'm in the back half of the game at this point. I've got
okay.
I know I have at least 2 brains still to explore. I'm guessing 3 or 4 total, like 1 or 2 more beyond that. But yeah, like
I'm still very much at the beginning.
Happening. There's a lot of story happening,
and it's really well told as a story, I think. Mm-hmm. And if you have played everything, it's a really compelling story because like it is pretty cool to see like, hey, we are rolling this story into this story into this story, and it does work.
Yeah, but that's even without Rhombus of Ruin, that's like it's very compelling because what it's really pulling on is all those threads from the original game.
I do think it would be really hard without the original game, though.
Oh yeah, no, it wouldn't work at all without the original game. I don't think.
Which the original game is a little aged. I will say, like
a little. It's still
pretty playable.
It's still a solid platformer. Like it's.
I mean, I feel like it would probably be easier to play on a console than on the PC, unless you're gonna hook up a controller to the PC.
You should
you should definitely play with a controller. Yeah.
Yes.
I did originally play Psychonauts with a mouse and keyboard, and you can, but a controller is what it's meant. I mean, it's actually kind of funny. The original Psychonauts was originally developed as an Xbox exclusive, and then Microsoft decided we're not going to publish it, and so they went and found a different publisher, who then went out of business after Psychonauts was an utter failure.
Oh, right. Microsoft owns them now.
And now Psychonauts 2 is an Xbox Game Studios game.
I forgot about that.
Because time is a flat circle.
Because I gotta say, that's one of the main reasons why I want to own an Xbox Series X eventually, is the huge catalog of backwards compatible titles that, gain additional life whenever... Whenever you play them upscaled on a new console?
Yeah, Psychonauts is one of the games that's available on PS4 via the PS4 backwards compatibility thing. Like, I'm pretty sure just as a, you can buy it and download it. If you don't already have it free on, 50 platforms.
I think I have it, free on at least 6.
I'm pretty sure I have at least three separate Psychonauts Steam keys, minimum. Maybe more.
Probably have spares from Humble Bundle.
But yeah, at this point, if you don't already own Psychonauts, you've, I guess, been actively avoiding it. So, okay. But if somehow you don't own Psychonauts and you actually would like to play it, it's available for everything. It's on every system.
It's almost as ubiquitous as Skyrim.
Yeah.
I know Twitch gave it away. I'm pretty sure Epic Game Store gave it away.
Yeah. I think pretty sure Good Old Games has given it away in the past.
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure it's been in more than one Humble Bundle.
I'm pretty sure it's been a Games with Gold title.
Yeah, it's been everywhere. But yeah, and if you haven't played Psychonauts but you have played Grim Fandango or Full Throttle, it's ultimately the brainchild of the same guy. The original Psychonauts started as a peyote-fueled drug trip in Full Throttle. They got cut from the game because not appropriate for kids. But Tim Schafer held on to that idea and came back to it. There's also some really great music in Psychonauts too.
It also has, so the other thing that I kind of have missed, I get it. There's not a ton of games. I guess I get it in Ratcheting Clank too, but I don't know. I find the collectible hunt in these games fun because it is at least somewhat constrained to the areas that are levels.
Mm-hmm.
But Kodra, collectathon platformers are dead.
Hmm?
I said, but Kodra, collectathon platformers are dead.
But
Nobody makes them anymore.
Nintendo makes them, and they usually
It's true.
sell pretty well.
And yet here I am, just about ready to dive back into the brains that I've already explored to make sure I got all the figments.
Yeah. Also, I would point out Ratcheting Clank is also this and seems to be doing pretty well.
What's so interesting about it, though, is like a lot of those collectible platformers were started as adding additional content when they didn't have enough space on the install to like put new levels. And, you know, because like if you look back to Mario 64, like the levels themselves are pretty small. And as a result, they had to create a bunch of different paths through it to make it feel like you had a bunch of different ways that you were playing through a given mission. And I think all of the collectible farming came from that era of did not have the budget to build a bigger map, but we wanted to add additional detail and additional functionality into the same map.
I mean, I think it works very well as a concept because it means you get to like keep exploring 3D space, and exploring level space is fun and interesting. Like, it's, to me,
If your character moves well.
Yeah.
Sure. Yes. I was actually about to say the game I was going to say it reminds me of, in like I enjoy exploring 3D spaces, is a game where I would not say the character moves well, which would be like Deus Ex, where it's like, this is a big, dense game and you don't have to do all of it the first time. Like, there's plenty of content to miss on your first play, so you can come back and do it again.
Oh, that reminds me.
I specifically remember enjoying exploring on Spyro because I liked the way that Spyro moved back in the day.
Thing I wanted to point out, there is no point of no return in Psychonauts 2. There is a point where it like tells you that like you should maybe take care of any side stuff you've still got before you dive into a particular brain. But it's having done that, it was more of a
this is just a long brain.
Yeah, it's more of a multiple cutscenes will play in sequence. Please prepare. like I have avoided reading anything else about, you know, the game beyond where I've played, but I did go looking to double check, and if having played past that point, I can absolutely go back to all the previous stuff. So that was not a point of no return. And once you get past the credits, you can go back and wrap up collections and things. So you don't have to worry about any of that.
I do appreciate that games have gotten better at telling you when you're about to hit a point of no return.
Mm-hmm. I've also become very appreciative of games that have a free play after you have completed the story mode.
Yeah, yeah, definitely.
Like all the Yakuza games do this as well, and I greatly appreciate it.
I have to admit, I like the ones that don't just roll back to the save point before the big thing. I like the ones that like, oh yeah, no, the story has resolved itself, but now you can continue going around the world and exploring.
Yeah.
So what is Marvel Crisis Protocol?
So it's a minis game, and so here there's a lot of game companies around here, and some very, very good game stores. And it's always interesting to me. It was not that long ago when the mini section of our local game stores was wall-to-wall War Machine and Hordes. And you can kind of see this like rise and fall of various minis games in the local area, and like what is on trend and what's going well, and what appears and then you never see it again. Like the Harry Potter minis game came out of nowhere and like flopped real hard for a bunch of reasons that make sense to me. Like, those were absolutely exquisitely detailed minis that looked just like the characters from the movies, which makes them basically impossible for you to paint. Good luck.
And I have a much older version of this, but back in the mid 2000s, Crimson Skies miniature game,
Yep.
like, was this massive explosion that just died out into nothing. Like, every store around here was playing it, and then no one was playing it.
Yeah. And there's a bunch of stuff. It's like, and it's interesting to see the stuff that catches on and then just lingers. You've got, Games Workshop stuff, which was down to very little and now is a huge portion of the mini section of the stores because they're actually doing a great job right now.
I mean, the AOS 3.0 launch box was, they could have built a castle out of those.
Yeah, there's so many of them. X-Wing, faltered a little bit, but has managed to stay pretty strong and is still pretty popular.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, even Infinity isn't stocked in the stores locally anymore. But the game that I've noticed, there's a bunch of Knight models, which were they were around for a while, but there was DC Comics characters that I guess had a minis game attached to them. But I was never really clear on anything about it, and it was kind of shuttled off to a corner pretty quickly. And then front and center has been Marvel Crisis Protocol. And it wasn't until I started talking to a few people locally who just absolutely gushed over this game that I picked it up. And I was like, all right, I like minis games. My fiance is interested in minis games, but doesn't find Games Workshop stuff super resonant. And also big armies aren't that interesting to her. So I was like, oh, what else? We've been rewatching the entire MCU and enjoying it. What is this? I picked up the core box. It's a clever little minis game. It's skirmish scale. It is a hard locked skirmish scale. You max out it. You can only bring 10 models, and mostly you're going to use half of that broadly. Somewhere between 4 and 6 models, and it's very difficult. It's very difficult to have more or less than that without doing something weird. I picked it up a couple of days ago, put the box together. We played through the demo game, and it's fun. It's clever. It is easy to pick up. It's simple and straightforward. You don't need a tape measure. It gives you all of your measuring tools. It plays kind of like Power Stone. If Power Stone were a minis game. So you're picking up cars and throwing them at people. You're jumping up on buildings. You're pushing and pulling people around. I mean, I think one thing that War Machine kind of pushed that other minis games mostly never did, and it was kind of its defining factor, was this idea that you can move your enemies around. You push your enemy, you can slam them into other enemies, and it was just never something you wanted to do. The game had those rules and then mostly didn't do a great job at making them something you actually wanted to do.
Yep. I was like, the throw mechanic from War Machine.
Yeah, you could throw people, you could push, you could pull them.
I remember the most compelling argument was you could throw the most I saw that in competitive was throwing your own models.
Yeah, it was there was just right. It was never a
good use of your actions to throw someone.
And in this one, we were partway through the mission. We realized that pushing people off of something is a really good way to take control of an objective because you don't actually need to fight them. And it plays a lot you're rolling dice pools against one another, and it's often somewhere between 4 and 6 dice on the offense versus 3 to 4 dice on the defense. So there's a lot of times where you will roll and do minimal or not very much damage, kind of like watching a Marvel movie where people bash into each other, but getting anything to actually stick doesn't seem like it happens much. But you capture that feeling where you're flying around, your characters all feel powerful and smashy, and you can pick up like light posts and throw them at people. You can pick up other people and throw them into buildings. Because the game is so focused on objectives, where either you're going to pick things up or you're trying to control a part of the board, moving people around is really, really valuable. And it's such a different feel from what I'm used to. It's a different feel from what I'm used to in minis games that aren't explicitly arena combat minis games. Like there's a bunch that are themed around, we put a bunch of people in an arena. But I don't find the gladiator style thing that compelling. Like it's just not a narrative or an aesthetic that I care much about. But in this, it's like, yeah, okay, I have this happens all the time in Marvel movies. I'm playing out my weird mashup Marvel movie. And they have a bunch of characters from movies and comics and mainstream and deep cuts. And they really, what I find kind of delightful about it is they really don't, there's only some very light things encouraging you to bring a coherent like movie force. Like you could pair up whoever you like.
Is there even a like heroes and villains?
Nope.
Okay. Any
your group can be any combination of characters. If you have above a certain threshold, I think it's 3 of your 5 or something, a majority of a particular faction, like has a particular like faction line, then you can use abilities that are keyed to that faction. So like if you have a bunch of Avengers, you can use Avengers keyed cards, but you have to actively choose to take Avengers keyed cards and not other cards that are powers. But then there's a bunch of characters that have 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 different keywords because it's comics. They've been in all kinds of places. Like I forget all of the keywords that Scarlet Witch has, but it's like 4 of them.
I was gonna say, I imagine Spider-Man has been, because he's been an Avenger. Has he been? Has he ever been on an X team?
He has not been on an X team. He did teach at the Jean Grey Academy for a little while.
Okay.
But yeah, I mean, they have a ton of different characters of different, like, there's a ton of different characters that have different like keywords that work really well, and you can run them all together. You can run the full Guardians of the Galaxy team if you want. You can run a bunch of Asgardians.
I'm really hoping that the fact that the movie just came out means there's going to be a Shang-Chi soon.
I have no idea how they choose what comes out.
I mean, it definitely seems like they have been like, ooh, a movie just came out. Let's make sure we have a sculpt for that.
Yeah. Well, he has been showing up more in the comics in the past few years, especially since they finally dealt with the whole, who his dad is thing and figured out a way to not have to worry about that in the future.
Yeah. Whoops.
Funnily enough, if you use a licensed character as the father of if you use a character from previous novels as the father of your character, and also said character is like the Yellow Peril character of all Yellow Peril characters, you might run into some problems down the road. Fu Manchu was a bad idea.
Yeah, yikes.
But yeah, I would be very. I mean, given some of the characters who you were mentioning in the chat, they do have sculpts of. I would be shocked if they didn't come out with a Shang-Chi if they don't already have one.
Yeah, I mean, and there's a ton of characters that are out, and they feel very well chosen.
I mean, they also they seem to be doing a thing in many cases where they are trying to make the costumes look very movie accurate, but not necessarily like the physical actor.
Yeah.
But
they go back and forth between, is this a movie version of the character? Is this the comics version of the character?
all of the Inhumans look very much like the version from the failed TV thing.
Really?
Yeah.
That's
I mean, I'm sure those licenses were cheap to
disappointing.
pick up.
I don't actually know who the Inhumans are, so
The big dog is an Inhuman.
Lockjaw.
Yeah, but Lockjaw looks amazing anyway.
I mean, Lockjaw always looks amazing. He is the best boy.
Who's the one who can't speak, or else everyone?
Black Bolt.
Black
Yes.
Bolt. Blackagar Boltagon.
He and his wife are also in there. I saw.
Okay. Yeah, Medusa.
But yeah, they have a bunch of the Inhumans.
So has this game been around for a little while then?
it's been around for a little while. It's one of those, it's been around long enough that I've noticed that it hasn't popped up and faded away.
Because the existence of sculpts for the Inhumans, particularly ones that look like the show, movie, whatever the failed thing was, that this implies to be that this game has been around since before Marvel got the X-Men rights back.
Yeah,
Because that's where they were pushing the Inhumans hard.
There are a bunch of X-Men as well.
Well, yeah, because they've always had the X-Men comics, but they just didn't have the movie rights. And then, funnily enough, they got the X-Men movie rights back, and then, like, Death of the Inhumans happened, and I don't know what the status of any of those characters is right now. They're just, not around.
Oh, you might enjoy this one. There is a box that is a duo pack of Deadpool and Bob.
Agent of Hydra?
Yeah.
All right. So Bob's worth, like, what, 2 points?
Yeah. Fall 2019 was the initial release.
Oh, okay. It's more recent than I would have thought then.
But yeah, I mean, it's got a ton of extremely 90s era X-Men, including like just what I think of when I think of X-Men.
I mean, you said they had a Cable and Domino pack.
They have they have a Cable and Domino pack. They have
sadly lacking.
But do they have a bishop?
Not that I've seen yet. They seem to be trying not to lean too heavily on any one particular thing.
That's probably smart.
So you've got like, Iron Man and also Carnage and also Jean Grey and also Lizard and also Ms. Marvel and Hood.
They keep trying to make the Hood happen.
I don't really know anything about this guy.
You don't need to.
Well,
he was the protagonist of a miniseries way back that was actually pretty good, and then they made him an awful person and tried to like set him up as the new Kingpin or something, and it's just...
They do have a Kingpin.
I think maybe he's dead now. It's for the best.
But ultimately, like what I think is really interesting about it is it's kind of looking at... There's been a bunch of minis games that are trying to rethink what minis games should feel like. Like, what is it they do? Because it doesn't have to be, columns of similar looking models all marching down towards the center of the board at each other. And how do you make that, like, what kinds of games lend themselves to that feeling good and being interesting? And like Marvel characters bashing each other, pretty good.
Yeah.
It's got a bunch of little in-jokes. It's got little Easter eggs in the form of both card abilities and like alternate parts, because they just have some extra space on the sprue. So like Beast can have a version with glasses reading a book versus, clawing at people.
Oh, excellent.
Deadpool has an alternate heart eyes head. It's like it understands that it's silly and leans into it, but also it's a simple but deceptively deep little game that mostly isn't about smashing each other. I've seen other minis games try to do this. Like, this is a game about objectives, not just beating each other up. And in Malifaux, and I never saw Malifaux quite hit its stride there, because like the mission changed every time, and if you had a mission that was best won by beating other people up, and you were playing against somebody who had basically no defense against beating people up and was there to do missions, you just either insta won or insta lost before you even get to the table. And this does a slightly different thing, and I think it's really interesting to see sort of these different approaches to minis games. And this one's very much it's very inspired by 5v5 multiplayer games and fighting games, and it works. Honestly, I think it's more fun than a 5v5 multiplayer game, but also it's just fun to have, hey, these are characters I recognize.
So is it like activations where you go, I go, sort of like a standard minis game?
It is alternating activations per character. Okay. So like I move a character, you move a character. Each character gets 2 actions. You go back and forth. Okay. It's got a bunch of really, really clever anti-snowballing. Okay. The player in any given round, the player with priority goes first, which, pretty standard. If the player who activates the last model in a round has priority, they pass priority to the other player. Okay. Which was a rule that I looked at and I was like, I don't quite understand what that's doing, until I realized the only way that's going to happen is if one player has fewer models than the other. Yeah. Fewer models means either you've lost models or you have less board control, and therefore moving first to try to take control of the round is vital for you so that you don't just get repeatedly pummeled.
Now, is this a game where different models have different point costs?
Yeah, they seem to range in between 2 points and 6 points. Okay. The way you actually play a match is kind of interesting. A match is constructed from 2 mission cards, and the mission cards have various objectives broadly in the take and the hold themes. So some are go here and control a thing versus go here and interact with a movable thing and try to secure the movable thing. And both players are kind of doing both, but the mission cards have a maximum points allowance. And so once those are selected, you go through the roster of 10 models that you brought to the table and put together that many points worth of models are the ones that you're actually going to play with.
Oh, okay.
Which you can then tailor to the mission at hand, which both makes sense for the theming and also means that it's a lot harder to lose before you even start rolling dice. Mm-hmm. And then to use characters like special attacks and special powers and stuff, you spend power points, basically mana. But in almost every case, you gain mana, you gain power points when you take damage. So characters who get damaged get powered up so that they can fight harder. There's also an anti-alpha strike mechanic where there's any given character has a front and a back of their card, which is the healthy versus injured. Healthy characters contest objectives better, but injured characters are still in the fight. And if you would lose enough health to be pushed into injured, you're halted until the end of the round. You can't get. It is not actually possible to one round any character in the game through the game's own mechanics.
That's good.
So you can't just alpha strike somebody off the board, which also good. Like there's downsides to having your characters get injured, but you can pretty well mitigate it. Like at one point in the game, the test game, I had Iron Man pretty beaten up, still healthy, but like 1 hit point left. And if you go down to 0 hit points, you get dazed, which if you try to activate, you would lose your turn. And then at the end of the turn, you flip over, at the end of the round, you flip over to injured. But because Iron Man activated first, I didn't really get that much value out of that one last hit point or getting Iron Man dazed. And instead of like trying to save hit points or to play defensively, Iron Man was just like, whatever, I'm going to take a point of damage somewhere in here. I'm going to blow somebody up real good on my way down. And it worked out surprisingly well. So there's a bunch of interesting tactics. I'm currently losing, but yeah, it's neat. The sculpts are fun. It's mostly just a fun, like, there's a lot of neat little details in it. I like any minis game that openly says just bring whatever models you like and it'll probably be fine. And that seems to mostly be the case here. Could run the all spider people team.
I mean, there were only three at once, right?
Yeah.
Even though there are more than three.
Yes, that's the other thing is every character has the hero name, but then also the real name.
Mm-hmm.
And the real name is what you use to determine if there's a duplicate.
Yeah, that's pretty important in Marvel these days.
Uh-huh. Yeah, you can have multiple Captain Americas or more than one Spider-Man or various other things.
No pulling in a second Peter Parker from a different reality though. Just one Peter Parker on the board at a time.
Not yet, but they've left some space open for. There's a note in the rules that's like the name has to be a direct match. So, as an example, Cyclops and Earth 2 Cyclops, Scott Summers and Earth 2 Scott Summers would be considered different characters.
Got it.
It doesn't actually seem to be a thing, but they do seem to be nodding towards maybe you could have multiple Peter Parkers.
I mean, that's a good thing to leave open if you're going to do a Marvel game, because
But yeah,
There's
they just
a lot
call
of
it
that.
like there's got to be an exact match.
there's a lot of alternate versions of characters that I could see people wanting the ability to field like both Cyclops and Age of Apocalypse Cyclops on the same team, for instance.
There's also Sam Wilson Captain America, who
nice.
That model looks really cool.
Yeah, they could theoretically make enough different Captain Americas that you could field a team of nothing but Captains America at this point.
Yeah. But they seem to be mostly trying to get a good blend and hitting people in the nostalgia. I think their newest upcoming release is Blade.
Yeah, it looks like they've got a lot of like mystical characters coming, which I don't know if that's deliberate with Midnight Suns having been announced, or just or possibly because October is coming and Halloween.
It is
just a happy accident.
It is hard to say. They also sell, and I think this was the thing that tipped me over the edge into I want to know more about this game. They have huge terrain packs that are also pretty well stocked, and I could not figure out why. It is pretty funny to me how interactive the terrain in the game is. Throw cars at people, throw cars to protect your allies. That's a fun one. Just throw a car so that your ally is better defended. Throw trucks.
I mean, it is a superhero battle after all.
Yeah.
I'm disappointed Cassandra Nova doesn't have a pith helmet. She should be wearing a pith helmet.
But anyway,
wow, Dr. Voodoo, really? Awesome.
Yeah, like there's some deep cut. Like I scrolled through here and recognized about 2/3 of the characters, which to me says that there's both good stuff for plebes like me who have mostly only watched the MCU and the 90s X-Men cartoon, and deep cuts people like Thalen and Bell who are like my favorite character that I've never heard of.
I'm really hoping that's a thing that we may get through What If, is some of those edge case characters, because like one of my favorite DC series was Batman Brave and the Bold, which was entirely deep cut characters that he teamed up with.
Like everybody showed up in Brave and the Bold. It was fantastic. I would like to, I would love to see them just like start an ongoing anthology Marvel series. Like do it animated similar to What If, and just they could do single episode deals. They could do multi-part stories, and just like hit some of those portions of the MCU that we're probably not going to see in the movies.
Well, okay, so they've done What If. they could
so we got
they
that.
could
Yeah.
dust off another popular serialized, one-shot thing and do Marvel Team Up.
Yeah. That's why I was saying either like Marvel Team Up or 2-in-1 or Marvel Team Up would be the obvious
Marvel
choice.
Presents.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm that's the other thing is it's driven us to want to we're like, who's this character? Let's read up on them, or like, is there a show we can watch or whatever, which is it's a good way to get into it. I'm real mad because I didn't want to like this game. I was hoping that it wasn't going to be a game that I enjoyed.
Why is that?
Because I would have liked to be like, no, it's fine. I don't need to spend money on this. But we were sitting at the table. We were sitting at the table right before the show because we were playing it basically right up to the show. We're like 2/3 of the way through the game. And my fiance's comment, she got through. Oh, she got through smashing Ultron with Captain Marvel. And she looks up at me and is like, "We're in trouble, aren't we?" Yes. But it reminds me a lot of HeroClix.
That's what I was going to say. Is it's interesting to me that there's another Marvel miniatures game out now when HeroClix is still like a going concern.
Yeah.
I'm surprised there wasn't like. I'm surprised that there's like licensing room for both to exist simultaneously. I don't know.
I'm not sure, but this is very. It is made by the miniatures gaming arm of Fantasy Flight Games that also does X-Wing. There's clearly some shared DNA, but they're very distinct from one another. And to me it feels like the game it feels like the game I wanted HeroClix to be, without losing the kind of fast arcadey fun of HeroClix. And it's got a co-op mode.
That's pretty cool.
Like,
how does that work?
It is you versus, I forget, it might be Thanos. I forget which character, but it's basically, they have a bunch of different game modes, some of which they have like an AI deck for the big bad. So you have multiple players who all bring their team to fight a big bad. Very WoW. You can play it either WoW raid deck style, where you have one person controlling a super powered big bad, or they're doing some where you can play with. It feels very like Kingdom Death, where they've got here's what it's going to do. Can you deal with it? And honestly, what a great approach to a Marvel minis game, because it's just like, let's just do formats that you don't normally see in minis games.
I mean, I could see this doing extremely well at like selling scenario packs that are basically like, here's Secret Wars.
Yep.
Lay out Secret Wars.
Mm-hmm.
They do the smart thing, and all of their rules are free online.
Assembly instructions are also free online.
Assembly instructions are free online. Ultron. It's you versus Ultron is the AI run one, which, fitting.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I like that they've got a bunch of different game modes. I like that they are doing interesting things with characters. It's not. I think that there's a missed opportunity in that they didn't call this ability Get Help, but Thor and Loki have a pair ability that is Get Help. It's really funny.
That sounds amazing.
On that note, we've probably recorded a show.
Seems likely.
Final thoughts?
Apparently King's Bounty 2 came out this past week.
Huh.
I was watching, this is just like a brief moment thing. I was watching something before the show, and apparently some of the Loading Ready Run crew helped contribute cards to the new Unset.
Yeah, so Graham Stark, Kathleen DeVere, and Cameron Lauder were on the card title and flavor text team.
Yeah, that should be great.
I'm looking forward to new Magic. Oh man, Magic's gonna be weird next year.
It is, but we probably
it sounds like
we can talk about that next week.
Yeah. Okay. Well, hopefully you enjoyed the show, and we will see you next week. Good night.
Good night.
Good night.
Good night.
good night.
See ya.
See ya.